Tomorrow afternoon at 3 o'clock, Lawrence, Kansas. Kansas and Baylor, Big 12, two teams at the top. Of course, Texas Tech is very much in the conversation, among others as well, including Texas Tech. We're now joined by Matt Tait, Lawrence Journal World. We've had Matt on before to discuss Kansas. And Matt, so many stories, Baylor with Flagler and Cryer and trying to find out what they can do. They'll make the trip, but it kind of comes down to whether they can play. And then Agbaji coming off COVID. And then obviously there's a lot going on, Remy Martin. So give us an idea, first of all. It seems like Agbaji's clear to go. You feel like he'll be 100%.
Yeah, I mean, I do. You know, it's hard to know exactly how COVID affects anybody. But from everything that we heard, he didn't have severe symptoms or anything like that. And I know that he's, I know it killed him to not play on Tuesday night, and he stayed very active and engaged with the team through social media and stuff. So I'm sure he's been resting and hydrating and taking care of himself as best he can so he can get out there because, the saddest thing about that game on Tuesday is it ended a 97-game streak of consecutive starts for him. And, that's not going to put you in the Hall of Fame or anything like that, but it's pretty cool, and it's a bummer to have it in because of COVID, right? I mean, if it was a cold or something, he would have powered through, and he'd be at 98 going into this one. So I'm sure that was disappointing to him, and I'm sure he's dying to get back out there.
For Remy Martin, Bill Self said about 60, 65% or wherever he is. When do you realistically expect to see him again?
Yeah, it's going to be at least another week or two. I mean, he won't play tomorrow. And, I think at this point they're trying to get him closer to at least 90%, I think. That seems like a reasonable way where you can kind of expect him to do the things he's capable of doing. And right now he's just not able to do those things. And so at 60%, he's not giving you anything. So, excuse me. I think the rest of this week, probably all of next week, could even go into the week after that. I mean, it's hard to gauge it and guess on it because it's a matter of pain tolerance right now and how it feels, how well he moves, things like that. So I think that it's probably I kind of thought 3 weeks when they shut him down, which was going into the start of this week. So that would be next week and the week after that too. So, I think 3 weeks gives it a fair chance. And then you see, because obviously they want him back for the stretch and for the tournament and all of those things. But it's a tricky situation too, because by that point you're talking about a player who hasn't played in a long time and wasn't 100% before that and is going to be dealing with some rust and things like that. So it's not ideal, we'll say that, but I know they would love to have him back before this thing's all over.
Craig, you're muted.
You still got me?
Yeah, we got. There you go, Craig. Go ahead.
Matt, how would you describe the last week for KU from the loss in the SEC Challenge to Kentucky? That was a little bit shocking, maybe final score-wise, to eking one out against Iowa State earlier this week.
Yeah, it was a weird week, no doubt, because they were favored in both of those games and favored against Kentucky at home on a big blue blood battle at home on College game day, all of that, and then to lay an egg. And then you go up to Iowa State with a bad taste in your mouth, and you follow that up by learning that Ochai is not going to play, and all of a sudden you're thinking, how the heck are they going to get this one done? And then it turns out it may have been one of the best things that happened to this team because it forced other guys to step up. It forced their bench to be a factor, and those guys delivered. And so, I think if they had beaten Kentucky or even played a better game against Kentucky and played them, tighter and down to the wire or whatever, even if they lost, I'm not sure they would have been in the right headspace to go up there and win that Iowa State game without Ochai. I think it would have been hard for them to be as hungry as they were. But coming off that loss to Kentucky and then realizing that the leading scorer in the conference is out and you got to find a way anyway. Nobody's going to feel sorry for you. I think that really challenged all of these guys and they took it personally and answered that call. So they deserve a lot of credit for that, of course. But it was a weird week. And I think it's one of those weeks that when you look back on this season, however they end up, whatever kind of run they make or don't make, however this season finishes, I think they'll look back at that transition between those two games as kind of a big moment, and especially if they make any kind of run worth talking about, anything Elite Eight or beyond. I think you'll look back at that and say, hey, this was a game where these guys realized they have more than just 3 or 4 players. There's actually guys on the bench they can count on and who can deliver if given the opportunity. So now we got to see if that carries over, and obviously there's no bigger test than the one they're facing tomorrow.
Yeah, and Baylor has been hit and miss a little bit. They had to gut it out to beat West Virginia on Tuesday, and I thought they were dead in the water. So they've had their issues. Do you feel like right now, other than Tech, the Kansas, of course, 7-1 in the conference, but got blown out by Kentucky. Baylor lost at Alabama. Are they playing like Final Four teams?
Kansas and Baylor, you're asking?
Yeah.
Gosh, it's so hard. I haven't seen a ton of Baylor. I thought until they lost 2 at home, they were, of course. But that made me wonder for sure, as little as I've seen. And it's hard for me to think, being as close to this as I am, it's hard for me to think that KU's there right now, mostly because of their defense. I mean, their offense is as good as they need it to be, as good as it can be right now, and it has multiple weapons, and they can play inside and out and things like that. And Baylor and KU, top 5 offenses in the country, of course, but I just don't like, especially for Bill Self teams. I don't really think that many people believe that's how you get to a Final Four. I think you've got to have some defense, and you've got to have a team that's consistent on that end of the floor. I think defense obviously can overcome a lot of shortcomings on offense way better than power and strength and quality things on offense can overcome shortcomings on defense. So I think the biggest question between now and the end of it for Kansas is how much better can their defense become? And if they can get better, if they can get into that top 20, top 25 range as a defensive team consistently, then you pair that with their offense, and then, I think they're as good a contender as maybe there is out there. But they were exposed against Kentucky. Fortunately for them, there aren't a lot of teams like Kentucky out there. The length and athleticism of Kentucky's big men, KU just had no answer for that. And so, that the good news from that perspective is they don't have to worry about when they get to the tournament playing a team like Kentucky 2-3 times in a row. There's only so many of those types of teams out there. So that gives them some hope and gives them also some time to get to the point where, they can shore things up a little bit and get better defensively and then really go after it and make a real run. But again, a lot of that comes back to Remy Martin too. I mean, he's not known for his defense by any means. He's an offensive spark plug and a point scorer and a playmaker and things like that. So when he's back, if they can get him back to that 90-100% health, if they're going to play him 25 minutes or 30 minutes a game, how much does his defense improve individually? And if the answer is not a lot, then he's probably not going to play those types of minutes either. So it's, it's weird to be entering, mid-February, just around the corner, and for Kansas and Celtic continue to have these types of questions, because this is stuff they usually figure out long before now, but they're still figuring it out, partly because of some injuries, but also partly because, of some things going on with guys in new roles and things like that. And it's just taking a little bit of time. They still do have some time, but if we talk before the next Kansas Baylor matchup, they'll be out of time by then. So it's a pretty big 3-4 week stretch right here.
David McCormick had a fantastic game against Iowa State. Is he, I guess, as the light come on, not really the appropriate term for him. Is he a guy that just got to deal with sometimes the light's on and sometimes it's not?
I think so. It's a very mental game for David McCormick. Physically, he's got everything you want. He's skilled. He's got good size. He's not a true rim protector, but he can be big down there. He can be a presence down there. His athleticism isn't going to wow anybody, but he's also pretty good for a guy that size in terms of moving athletically and laterally. And moving on his feet and getting and running and things like that. So the physical part is usually there. It's the mental side of it that continues to kind of be what holds him back, and it kept him from being consistent. A great example is that Kentucky game where he went up against a guy like Oscar Schwebe and was excited about the matchup and had known him since AAU. They used to be teammates, and he'd played against him before at West Virginia and had good games against him. So it wasn't like anything he hadn't seen, but he was totally outclassed, and he finished with 3 points and 1 rebound in 16 minutes. So he's still prone to disappearing like that, and Kansas just cannot have that the rest of the way. But then he responds like he did against Iowa State and went for 14 points and 14 rebounds, didn't miss a shot, looked like a man possessed, played to his size, played with passion. So it's there. It's always there. It's just a matter of, does he slow down? Does he calm down? Does he stay out of his own head and stay within himself and allow himself to get out there and deliver what he needs to deliver? Certainly easier said than done for anybody, but he's a senior, and I think that he's been around enough to know what it takes and what's required and all of that. He's had a foot injury going all the way back to the preseason. They've been talking about that a little more here in the last couple of weeks, continuing to say it's not an excuse, but it is a factor, the foot sore, that kind of thing. But, Self and David McCormick would be the first one to tell you, sure, that may be the case, but the reality there is if I'm going to go out on the floor, I know that I'm expected to deliver. And when I don't deliver, I'm letting the team down. So, this is a big game for him. I mean, like I said, that was sort of a Jekyll and Hyde thing, Kentucky and then Iowa State. And so now Kansas has an opportunity here, and he'll be going up against some good guys and good size. And obviously Flo Samba's a guy that can body with him and do some battling and whatever. And it won't be easy. So he's got to show that he can be relied on in these types of games, because these are the types of games they're going to need him the most if they want to get where they want to go. And they've said throughout the year that they're not going to be as good as they think they can be or as good as they want to be unless he's playing well. And so that's kind of shown, even though they only have 3 losses, that's kind of shown up in their 3 losses and in some other games where they've struggled but still found a way to win. It's been, David McCormick didn't really fully deliver, and it almost cost him, or it did cost him. So they need him. They're going to keep playing through him. They're going to keep trying to have him click and get it figured out. And if it does, like it did last season in Big 12 play, and he finishes as a double-double machine and on a hot streak, then they're going to be tough to beat.
He was big in that game last year at Lawrence against Baylor. I think he had 14 points in the first half, and he just kind of if they get him like that tomorrow or elsewhere, then obviously they're good. Wilson and Harris both showed up. Not that Wilson hadn't done that before, but they both scored in double figures. How huge was that on against Iowa State that they showed up because of Agbaji not being there?
Yeah, it was massive. DeJuan Harris played probably his best game since he's been at Kansas. And, he redshirted his first year, so he's been here 3 years now. And a no-frills kind of guy, just, goes to work every time out there. He doesn't say a whole lot. His size doesn't overwhelm anybody. He's a little dude, but he's so gifted. He's so talented. He's so smart. And, they want him to be more aggressive. They want him to be an offensive presence out there, and he was the other night. Now, a lot of his offense came from his defense, and that's what he's best at, is quick hands, active hands, playing defense, and creating havoc. And he got a lot of buckets the other night off of those types of plays. So, if that's where he can be moving forward, that's exactly what they need and want from him. I mean, there's Remy Martin or no Remy Martin. DeJuan Harris is this team's point guard, and Remy Martin's a nice option and a nice compliment, and a guy you can put out there who can score in bunches in a hurry. But nobody's going to take DeJuan Harris's role as the lead guard and the guy that initiates everything. So that was big for him and big for them, especially on a night when Agbaji didn't play. So now, and Jalen's the same way. I mean, he looked like he played with a purpose that was similar to what he did most of last year, where he kind of had that alpha mentality. He had that go-to player look to him, and and he's comfortable in that. Jalen could walk into any gym and tell you he's the best player there, and then go try to back it up. And that's just how he's wired. He's confident, he's competitive, and you love guys like that. So they both showed up big time in understanding that they had to elevate their game with Agbaji out. And I think, again, that's what I said a minute ago about how that could go down as the best thing to ever happen to this team. It forced other guys to remember and remind themselves that, hey, look, we don't just have 17, 18 wins because we have the leading scorer in the Big 12 and a guy who's in the conversation for first team All-American and National Player of the Year. We've got much more than that. And I think that sometimes it's easy because of the way Ochai has played all season long and how efficient he's been and how good he's been. It's easy for guys to defer to that or get caught kind of standing around and waiting for him to do it. And they didn't have that luxury the other night, and they stepped up instead of falling down. And so it was a good reminder for them that the team has more weapons and more pieces. And I think they knew that all along, but it's just not been necessary every time out. So it was a big performance for them. And of course now, as long as he's feeling well tomorrow, he's obviously cleared. He had a negative test today, so he's in good shape and, eligible to play. So as long as he's feeling well, they'll get their first crack at kind of marrying the two schools of thought. Like, let's ride our horse, let's ride our All-American, but let's also remember that these other guys can help him along the way, and maybe he doesn't have to be everything all the time.
Matt, thank you again for being a part of the show. Matt Tait, the Lawrence Journal-World, covers KU and Baylor tomorrow afternoon in Lawrence. Allen Fieldhouse Fog at 3 o'clock, the tip. That's it with Matt Tait. Earlier we had Scott Drew. Coming up next, a couple of other sports stories to get to, an NFL coaching hire.